everybody, I've got Tim Evans with us. He is from Traverse City Home Inspections. And Tim, how long have you been an inspector in this region?
My company, Megan's been around for about 35 years. I took it over 12 years ago, and I've expanded it and made a larger service area. But I've been the owner for 12 years.
Awesome. Congrats. That's cool. And Tim is a very well-known, reputable inspector in the area. And when I emailed everybody today and said, hey, just a reminder, we got Tim Evans. I got a couple emails back from agents that didn't go to all of you because you were all BCC'd, but Carrie King was one of them. And she's like, Tim is the best. So Tim is very well respected in our region. Services all over Northern Michigan. Is that correct?
Yes. And I can tell you, we currently go from Charlevoix, Petoskey all the way down to Ludington, and then we stay west of I-75. So anything in that corridor we inspect.
Okay, great. Well, and Tim is also very involved with the realtor community here in Northern Michigan. He's been on committees and all kinds of different stuff. So he is an asset certainly to us. And he was willing to come on and talk about all things home inspections and answer some basic questions and maybe a little bit more complicated questions as well.
Well, thanks everybody. I'd like to keep this as informal as possible. So Megan was nice enough to give me kind of an outline or a guide of questions that might be helpful for everyone to discuss. I'll be more than happy to go through those, but feel free to interrupt me at any time and just, let me know if you have a question, and some realtor insight to any of these topics would be awesome. So I would appreciate that. So just a couple of the first things, she gave me a list of about 10 questions I'll run through. The first one is, what's the typical cost of an inspection these days? So what I did when I got this list, I looked back about the last 12 months. And in our service area, average is around $500. Now there's a lot that are more expensive. There's some that are less expensive, but that's the average. Okay.
What affects the price, Tim?
Pardon me?
What affects the price of the inspection?
Yeah. So there's a couple things, Megan. Thanks for that. It really depends on the age of the home. Sometimes after talking to a client, it's a 125-year-old home that needs a lot of work, it's going to take us more time to document everything. It doesn't mean anything's deficient, but it's just going to take us more time as an inspection company. So that's one thing. The other thing is just the overall conversation that I have with a client. Square footage comes into play. The other thing that can affect the price is what kind of testing that client he or she wants us to do. Radon testing, septic evaluations, whatever it might be. I always tell people we can pretty much do anything you might need to have a home purchased, but it really comes down to what the client wants. And sometimes there's going to be other things that affect the price, like if it's a federally backed program, there's going to be certain guidelines that we have to follow in that regard too.
So Tim, I know you have your list of questions, but I'm going to probably screw you up a little bit. But when you talk about the average cost of a home inspection, again, that's the average and we know what it can be affected by. What does that include? Is that just the home inspection? And then can you talk a little bit about like other inspections like well, septic, and even can you touch on other inspections like radon that people might want to have?
We sure can. So what I normally do, and either myself or one of my colleagues answers the phone at our company. And so when we set these up, the kind of the normal course that we take is we want to find out, number one, and this is probably the most important question we ask our client is, do you have any concerns about the home? Or is there anything about the home you'd like us to know about? That way we can find out from that client what's important to them so we can address that at the inspection. 9 times out of 10, it's something that's really not that important. In other words, it's important to them, but as far as them purchasing the home, it may not be. It's probably something they experienced from another home that they owned, but we still want to uncover that. So that's the first thing that we do when we pick up the phone. And then, of course, if it's a federally backed program, to Megan's point, they might require a septic evaluation, a water test. Those two things are always important to know. And then we do, like she said, radon testing is very commonly done. We do water quality testing a lot. What I normally do with everybody, regardless of what kind of mortgage, I provide all of our services, and then I let the client decide what's best for them. So I never really want them to be pushed in one way or the other unless I think after talking to them that this is a house that needs some additional testing. And I'll give you a real quick example. This happened just last week, so this is kind of cool. Cool for a home inspector, not so great for everybody else. But I had a client call us in regards to an old property on Silver Lake here in Traverse City. And they just wanted the home inspected. They said everything else is fine. It was built in the 50s. And I was probing a little bit, and I said, and I say this to everybody, I tell people that the most overlooked part of a home inspection is usually the waste system, be it a municipal sewer line or a septic system. And I said, at a very minimum, you should get information about that. And this is important for realtors to know too, because this is something you don't want to get bid at or bid on later on if it's overlooked. So this gentleman said to me, you know what? The home inspection is going to be about $450. I don't want to spend any money on the septic. And I said, okay, we'll do what you want. And then he described, as he was going through the house, the condition of it. It was built in the 50s. The chimney wasn't taken care of. And he was describing all these things. And I said, that's wonderful. Can I just give you my take on this? And he said, yes. He goes, if I was buying this home, I would really have the septic evaluated. And he didn't, he said, I'm going to think about it. So I called his realtor and I told her that. And so she said, I agree with you. So she contacted the client and said, I talked to Tim. He thinks you should have the septic inspected. Well, he hemmed and hawed and he had it inspected. This is very rare, but the septic system was failed. And so again, my point in even bringing this up is you don't want to overlook an older home septic system. You should always have it evaluated unless the homeowners can tell you something about it, like they just had it maintained or cleaned and it's in good condition, but he couldn't do that. And then afterwards, he thanked me profusely about, I'm so glad we had that inspected because it's going to be a $20,000 system to replace.
Yeah.
So, and I tell you guys that as a inspector friend kind of thing, just don't ever get bit by a bad septic system because it's underground. People don't know anything about it sometimes, kind of out of sight, out of mind thing. So just do your due diligence when it comes to that component of a home.
Yeah,
That's a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Tim, did your company perform that inspection, or did you have to bring in somebody else to do the?
Yeah, so we do everything in house except for septics. And in our area, I use a guy by the name of Butch Straight.
Yeah. Okay.
And Butch is phenomenal. He's the only one I use. I've used everyone in our area, and I always go back to Butch. And the reason is he communicates with the client the best, and he evaluates the host system. So one cautionary thing I'll tell you all is it's very common for someone to say in an older home, we just have the tank pumped. And keep in mind, that's not the host system. That's just the tank. So you have a drain field. And in this home that I was just referencing, that's what was bad. It was the drain field. It wouldn't even accept water. It was just ponding. And so always remember, there's more to a septic system than just having the septic tank pumped, especially on an older home.
Excellent, excellent. And agents, if you are ever asked by a client, should I have this inspection or should I have this additional inspection, you should never say no. And honestly, I want my client to have every single inspection for their protection. I encourage them to have all of the inspections that are available, including radon. You will hear a lot that radon isn't in our area. It absolutely is. I mean, it's in the ground. It's in the ground and it can fluctuate and change. So you might have really low radon levels 1 year and retest a year later, and they could be much, much higher. So always have your clients have as many inspections, in my opinion, as you can, and never tell your client no if they ask you if you should have an inspection on something.
That's great advice, Megan. The one thing, if I think of all the ancillary tests you can have a home, from septic to radon to water quality testing, there is more confusion about radon than any other topic. Nothing is even close. And the one thing I can tell you about radon is you can find it just about anywhere. Now, this is just anecdotal, but I keep really good records at our company. We've done thousands of radon tests over the years. We find it on the west side where we service in about 1 out of every 6 homes. And that is a level over 4 or higher in 1 out of 6 homes. So you never want to say to anybody, you know what, you don't need to have your radon test because it's not common in that area. Because the minute you say that, it's going to pop its ugly head somewhere. One of the more common things, and I had 2 calls this morning where people said this. They said that their home they're buying does not have a basement, so there's no need to test it for radon. And did you all know that the foundation has nothing to do with the presence of radon in a home? It's totally dependent on the soil underneath the house and the airflow within that structure. So it's totally dependent on that. It has nothing to do with the home, the foundation. The other thing that can be very common in our area, and throughout Michigan, there's a lot of brand new construction going on. And there's a thought process out there that we've discovered that people will say, because the home is new, there's no need to test for radon. Or they might say, my builder is a high-end builder. He or she has built homes for 30 years. They're not going to have radon in their home. And the presence of radon has nothing to do with the quality of a builder. You could have the best builder in the area and you could still have elevated radon. Unless that builder tests for radon, he or she is not going to know.
And that's because the radon is in the soil. It's actually in the soil. It has nothing to do with the structure.
Absolutely. It's in the soil. And then the other thing that's a very common misnomer is people will say, my neighbor just tested. He's very close to my house and they have extremely low levels. But that in itself has nothing to do with the level inside your home.
Well, and am I correct, Tim, in that every home is going to have some level of radon? And I always told my clients, that radon's not something to be scared of. If you, let's say you are buying a home and it does have high radon levels, because when you do the remediation, obviously you would do remediation or have the seller do it. But once you do the remediation, it takes your radon levels consistently lower than they ever would be naturally. Correct?
That's absolutely correct. I tell people this every day. I've never seen a home where we find elevated radon. I've never seen a situation where the mitigation companies have come in and they were not able to reduce the level to a low level. Normally, again, the level to remember is 4 or higher according to the EPA must be mitigated. But when they put a mitigation system in, it's almost below 2 every single time. And then to Megan's point, which is really good, you guys are all in a building right now. You're being exposed to radon and you're perfectly fine, but you only get concerned when it gets to an elevated level.
Tim, can you talk a little bit about the remediation? Like what is it? Like, how do you remediate for radon? And can you give us a little idea of the cost? I mean, I know the cost can vary a little bit, but.
Sure. If you think about most radon, it's going to be found in the lowest livable area of the house. So wherever that is, that's where the concentration is going to be the highest, obviously, because it comes from the soil. So the way the devices work, and they're really simplistic devices. They're nothing more than a 3.5 to 4 inch PVC pipe that is installed into the concrete pad underneath. And the idea is you're going to have a pressure differential between below the home and above it, or inside of it. And then all they do is they attach a electric fan motor to that PVC pipe, and they basically are just drawing that heavy radon gas out of the home. And radon gas is about 7.5 times heavier than oxygen, so it's easy to mitigate. And again, I've just never seen a system that was installed properly that didn't work. So that I always tell people this: if they want us to test for radon, I say I would. That's a great idea. And I say, keep in mind, even if we were to find elevated radon in your home, it's easy to address. In regards to the price, I have seen anywhere from $800 to $1,600 for the mitigation system. It really depends on the square footage of the home and the design of it.
Yep, that's great. And I would say kind of an average cost that I've seen, like if I were to go get quotes, usually around like $1,100-$1,200, would you, for most homes that I've seen?
Yep. Yeah, that's right. And there's a number of good companies that do radon mitigation. The one company you guys want to write down if you haven't heard this is just the largest company, and I refer to them a lot because I've met many of their technicians over the years, and it's called SWAT, S-W-A-T, Environmental. And I can assure you, I talk to realtors all the time that they say, they've never sold a home that had radon in it, but if you sell enough homes, it's going to come up. It's just a matter of time.
Awesome. Does anybody have any other questions or anything to add regarding radon? No? Okay. All right. Well, I want to ask another question, Tim, and it's not on your list. So
Sure. Go for it.